Hermes as psychopomp, not just God of the highway, but guide, guardian angel, if you will, who journeys between the divine realms of heaven and the human realm of earth, and beneath that, the underworld of the dead. Hermes' role as spirit guide in connection to matters in the dead and the process of dying is portrayed in the great journey epic, the Odyssey. Book 24 opens on the heels of the great Greek warrior Odysseus' return to Ithaca after his decade-long journey away from home. Arriving home, expecting to be greeted by his wife Penelope, Odysseus instead is greeted by the suitors, who in his absence had wooed his wife and taken over his castle. In a terrible battle, Odysseus slays the suitors, who then wander in limbo between life and death. To Hermes, Zeus assigns the task of guiding these lost suitors into the underworld. But Hermes is unique in mythology, as he not only leads souls down into the underworld, he leads them back up again into the day world. It is Hermes, for instance, who returns the young daughter Persephone, who'd been kidnapped by Pluto, god of the underworld, whisking her away from the kingdom of the dead, back up to the daylight world of her mother, Demeter. In the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, that star-crossed pair of lovers, it is Hermes who leads Eurydice back up from the land of the dead as she follows her beloved back to life, and then back down again when Orpheus makes the fatal mistake of looking back. So whether fetching Demeter for a meeting with Zeus on the peaks of Mount Olympus, hovering at the crossroads, or shepherding souls into the underworld, Hermes is the go-between God, linking the heights and the depths, shuttling between the human and the divine. So in this kind of snapshot overview of Hermes, we see the development of two sides of a communication style. We see here even Jung's own spirit of the time and the spirit of the depths. There is an everyday, mundane style of communication around business transactions, reporting the news, the who, what, why, and where, the steady stream of information itself that comes through the modern media today. And on the other hand, there is the more mystical, profound Hermes, who acts as a guide to the deeper realms of the psyche, bringing dreams to the sleeping, journeying with the dead to the underworld, and who is a wayfarer for lost souls. So if it is true, as Jungian scholar James Hillman says, that Hermes Mercury is the god of the modern age of communications, then it could also be said that we've kept one side of the god Hermes, his sort of shallow quicksilver side, while losing the other deeper dimension of his character. As a result, Hermes, the god of our media in our time, has become a messenger more secular than divine. In a culture that has lost the gods, says Hillman, a culture from which the gods have withdrawn, we have the messages, but they do not carry the god's meaning. Hermes, Hillman writes, may convey to us mere information, a blog, a tweet, a joke, but, he says, not wisdom, not knowledge, not inspiration, not comfort, not truth, not prophecy, not moral value or aesthetic beauty. Instead of messenger of the gods, said Hillman, Hermes has today become servant of the internet. So what kind of wisdom can we take from these myths and stories of Hermes as he was in the ancient world, and as the one-sided, one-dimensional figure he's degenerated into in our era? Where can we look for examples of news balanced by a depth perspective? What qualities go into depth journalism? In some of our interviews, Hillman himself gave me a few hints. Part of the calling and mission of journalism, he said, is reporting balanced by reflection. Active reflection is something that takes time, and that information. It takes time to feel the weight of emotion behind a tragedy, time to discern the conflicts and the underlying narrative patterns underlying the story. So we find these principles of reflection at work in the media, in those news stories that actually take time to investigate, report, and write. Like the feature stories in the Atlantic Monthly, for instance, or the New Yorker, or documentaries on the Pythia show Frontline. Stories that can take up to a year or longer to put together, where journalists have had to interview many different people and then synthesize and put together a whole body of information into one piece. This is called long-form journalism, and it is an endangered species. And many journalists I know today are bemoaning the shrinking outlets for this kind of journalism. Modern-day media, Hellman felt, could also benefit from taking a longer view. Rather than MSNBC's logo of leaning forward, Hellman said he would rather media lean backward. This going backward, this looking back in history, as Hellman would have us do, has never been an American thing. From the moment the first settlers set foot on the shore of our new land, we've never liked to look back. Like our media, we are a restless and discontented people. We've always been future-oriented, always on to the next new thing. But looking back is what roots us in an ongoing narrative. It's what gives us a sense of continuity and cohesiveness. Examples of the kind of perspective in the media that come from looking backward in time, I think, can be found in the commentary that's sometimes provided by historians like Doris Kearns-Goodwin or David McCullough, when there are current events going on and they come in and they amplify whatever is going on with current events with historical perspectives. Depth journalism also doesn't just report the news, it interprets and finds meaning in the events. The word hermeneutics, in fact, comes from Hermes, and it means to interpret and find meaning. I don't know about you, but so often when I'm reading or watching the news, I often feel like, just like when I've eaten too much junk food, I feel full, but I'm just not really satisfied. Nothing nutritious has come to me. I get the news, but I don't get any of the underlying meaning that would help me digest these events. In the reporting of the Newtown shooting, for instance, there was it catalyzed a lot of pro and con debate around gun regulation and mental health. But one of the questions that I heard asked repeatedly, but that was never really answered, was why? Why is this happening in America today? This is a question that I hope we're going to take up on the panel tomorrow. But for tonight, I'll just say that this is an example of how the media sometimes overlooks the deeper psychological and spiritual dimensions of a tragedy or a news story as it happens. And that what we need today is more of hermeneutics, more of Hermes' role in illuminating and bringing out the inner meaning of these outer events. This is the perspective I try to bring in my own interviews with thinkers for the Huffington Post. That in my view, interviews are one of the best mediums for actually getting a depth perspective on current events, as it's through dialogue and exchange of different perspectives that we get this multi-dimensional, more soul-satisfying perspective. So some examples that I like in the media are Charlie Rose on PBS, or Bill Moyers, or Terry Gross on Fresh Air. Especially, I think, when they interview poets and writers, because it's from these thinkers that we get that mythopoeic dimension that Young is all about, and that is so missing from coverage of news today. turn it